Well, it is a very exciting time for the NBL, one of the best resumes in Australian sport, joining the league as the new CEO. He's been a very busy man already, so it's great to have David Stevenson sit down today. David, welcome to the NBL, firstly.
Thanks, Jack. It's always a pleasure to spend some time with you. Appreciate the opportunity today.
And as I say, you've been very busy already. I feel like you haven't officially started yet and you've been everywhere.
It does feel like I've got two jobs at the moment, but still got a little bit of time to finish off at the end at the AFL, and then can't wait to get started with the NBL, really in July.
So I mentioned your resume, currently the General Manager of Operations at the AFL. You've worked as CEO of the Western Bulldogs, you've worked with Nike, you've lived here, you've lived abroad. I'm interested to know your impressions of the NBL from an outsider looking in. What did you think of the league before you joined?
Yeah, look, my first perception is really as a fan. I'm a fan of the NBL. I've been to plenty of games, both here and in Sydney and in Queensland. And I just love the match day experience. So I think that's where the NBL does a phenomenal job with the clubs. That it's just a unique, fantastic experience. I think from a business point of view, at the AFL we certainly noticed that growth. And that's both in broadcast ratings and engagement and attendances and just the buzz that it's created. So, from a distance, it's been really impressive, that growth, but also just the growth opportunities ahead. It's untapped and we're excited about what that might be.
It's a very different organisation to a lot of sporting leagues in that it's privately owned. Is that a positive? Was it appealing to you knowing that you can make a decision and something can happen pretty quickly?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think every time you've got private ownership, it always relies on great passion. And I think for what Larry has invested into this sport, not just in a financial sense, but really that great energy and passion has been so impressive. So yes, lots of great benefits, and there's always going to be differences and challenges with being a private business too, but I think on the whole, it's a massive positive, and the ability to turn quickly ideas into execution is certainly one of the key reasons I came along.
Anyone who knows anything about Larry knows that growth is one of his favourite words, but I also think if you're a fan of the NBL, you've seen the growth and you've lived it. What are the growth pillars going forward? Because this league is not a sort of league that sits still. It's always looking at what is next. So what are the key pillars for the league?
Yeah, I think growth is one of the main reasons I wanted to come and join. And so when you see that opportunity, it's just energising. I'm always a big believer that growth always starts with the fan. How do we make sure we can find more of the people who love NBL and basketball, connect with them deeper, and then create an amazing experience, whether that's at games, whether that's on broadcast, whether it's interacting with their favourite players. There's some of the opportunities that people interact with the NBL. So I always think about fan first. Two, I think we've got to think through a partnership with the clubs, because fans support a team, and so how do we make sure we can have that deep connection, not just with the code, but also with their club and their players. And then third is also how do we have the venues and the broadcast experience facilitate a fantastic experience for families, and that's clearly our priority. So I think if you think about fans and clubs and then venues and broadcasters, there's so much growth opportunity ahead.
You're a family man as well, and you mentioned that you've gone to games and that's kind of how you were really attracted to the league, and a lot of people say that. Do you see that the game day experience as being one of the league's biggest strengths?
Absolutely. I mean, I've got three young kids, and they love coming along, and the fact that it's done in really under 2 hours. It's indoor, so the weather doesn't really change things. For that whole 2 hours, there's energy happening, whether or not it's the game, whether it's in the breaks, whether it's off court, and there's just such a great spirit, and it's hard to be tangible with that, but people love being a part of those game days, and so I think that's a unique opportunity that we've got, and particularly in the environment you can create an indoor arena with all of the special effects. I think it's our unique point of difference. Do your kids have a team? They do. They're a little bit mixed actually. Okay. So a couple with United and one with Phoenix, but they had a bit of a shining towards the Breakers over the championship series, and then they followed just some of the individual players as well. Ben Ayre is one of my favourites as well, coming from Cairns, now obviously going to Phoenix, but there's so many great clubs and athletes that there's so much choice for us to connect with as a family.
I'm pretty sure Ben Ayres got very excited about the fact that he's the CEO's new favourite player. NBL 24 fixture came out a few weeks ago. I think one of the things that jumped out at people was the start date, but in particular starting in Melbourne with a throwdown on the Thursday of AFL Grand Final week. It's a pretty bold move. Try and give us an idea of the strategy behind it.
Yeah, look, I wasn't involved in that decision, but I'm incredibly supportive of it. I think the thing you love about sport in Melbourne and frankly around the country is that people might be AFL fans as their first sport, but they love so many other sports. And so the fact that people in that week are excited about sport, why wouldn't the NBL try and take advantage of that? You know, there's pretty significant interstate tourists coming for that week and for that game. There's a great buzz around the city. It's one of my favourite weeks of the year to be in Melbourne. So if we can find a way to leverage that into an incredible game, and I think the Throwdown's one of those iconic games throughout the season that really sets this city alight, why wouldn't we take advantage of it? So I can't wait to see how it goes, but I know it's going to be an incredible success.
We're going to talk a lot about growth because, again, that's one of the key words, but there has been some criticism levelled in recent years in not perhaps paying enough respect to the past or maybe moving forward too quickly, depending on who you talk to. As a new person coming into the league, how important is the past versus where the league's heading in the future?
Yeah, I think it can't be underestimated how important it is to be respectful and to take learnings and celebrate the past. I mean, so many people when I've got this role have said to me, oh, I love the NBL. I remember when I was a kid and I used to see the Magic and Tigers play, and you know, or I was a Giants fan, and that really is a connection that today the kids are often being connected through the parents who went through a lot of those great times. And so I think we should embrace that and champion it. And yes, clearly some of the teams have changed since then, but there is such a deep connection between people and our competition through the incredible 40 plus years of this great competition. So, you know, in my time, we will absolutely celebrate those times and be proud of them. And as we look forward, we want to be able to use that history and that heritage to help us move forward as well.
Expansion's always a hot topic. Everyone always wants to know where the next team is going to be and when it's coming in. If there was a prospective market or government organisation, whoever watching this, what are the key things for the next team to come into this competition? What's important from a league point of view?
Yeah, look, I'd firstly start by saying the interest in new teams has been the highest it's ever been in our time. I think people from every state, you know, in Australia, New Zealand, and certainly across the globe are interested. They're taking notice of what's happening here and they want to be a part of this growth story. It's really easy to be able to say that, but I think really when the rubber hits the road is three things. You know, you need one, strong fan support. You know, the fans are the lifeblood of our game. So we want to make sure that we look for those opportunities to create more fans and connect with them deeply. Second is facilities, and that's twofold. One is the venue. It's got to make sure that we've got a state-of-the-art venue that's going to fulfil the expectation that our fans have. And then secondly is obviously the training facilities for that team to make sure from a high performance point of view that they can fulfil their potential. And the government becomes those key partners, whether that's at the state level, the federal level, or at the local council. And then third is the corporate support. But we know it's expensive to be able to run an NBL team. And so to be able to create the ticket prices to be at a reasonable level, to be able to attract the high quality players that we know really move the dial, we need to have great commercial partners. And we are blessed in the NBL system to be able to have fantastic league partners, but also the clubs. When you look at the portfolio across the whole ecosystem of the NBL, it's a really impressive list and more wanting to come in. So if we get those three things right, then we're certainly keen to progress those conversations.
You know I'm not doing my job if I don't ask you for a timeline. Is there any kind of rough indication of what we might be looking at in terms of a new team?
Not yet. I mean, I think that the easy thing would be to give you a time and set an expectation. But I think what we've learned, particularly I think with the Jack Jumpers and the Phoenix, is you've just got to make sure you start strong. We can't afford to start slowly and have a team that isn't set up for success, a fan base that's not engaged, in a venue that's not where it's need to be. And I think that, most recently the Jack Jumpers model, every game for the first 2 seasons sold out, fantastic fan connection, corporate support. That's the model that we want to make sure when we do expand, and we absolutely will expand, that it starts strong and then it creates this incredible growth journey.
You've worked here, you've worked in Asia, you've worked in the US, you've got a pretty good understanding of the global market. Why is it important for the NBL to explore beyond Australia? Because some people would say, why are we looking overseas? Why are we putting time and effort into these other markets? Why don't we just focus on what's happening here?
It's a great question and a fair question, but the great thing about basketball, as you know very well, it's the second biggest sport in the world, and so the interest in basketball and the NBL goes beyond our shores. Now, we could either let that interest lay dormant, or we can look for opportunities to say, well, how do we leverage that? Now, the modern technology allows us to connect with those fans, whether they're sitting in Manila, or they're sitting in Portland, Oregon, or they're sitting in Paris. And so why wouldn't we find ways to connect? And that could be through our broadcast, through our social media. Ultimately, it might end up being teams and games over there. But I think it just creates great growth opportunity, and the stories for our clubs and our players that, yes, you're playing in a league that's primarily in Australia and New Zealand, but it has a global footprint, and that's pretty appealing.
And the NBA obviously goes hand in hand with that. We've got a number of Aussies playing right now and have across the season. It's a World Cup year as well. But what's the benefits, I guess, from having a bigger and better alignment with the NBA?
Look, from what I understand, the NBA have been incredible partners with the NBL, and I think we appreciate that, but also I think we've earned their respect. Yep. And that's come through those pre-season games. I've seen the quality of our competition. They've seen players graduate from NBL, not only just to play in the NBA, but to dominate the NBA. And when you look at the stories, whether they're a Josh Giddey coming through the Next Stars program, or even most recently Jock Landale and what he's been able to do for the Suns after coming from Melbourne United, that's an amazing pathway. And so if we can foster those relationships, and look, who knows where that partnership will go, but it's clear the NBA is such a dominant competition within the code. And so if we can work hand in glove with the NBA, I think we'll have an endless possibility for growth.
And has that already started with the 2K relationship and Oz Gaming?
Absolutely, yeah. And that's what I love about that 2K relationship, is attracting a different fan to the fan who's watching a pre-season game between NBL and the NBA players, and different to when you've had NBA players come and play in the NBL league. And again, all that does is find different ways for us to connect with fans. And if we do that in a really meaningful, connected way, then they're going to love the NBL, and they're going to tell their friends, and they're going to tell their family members, and this great growth trajectory just goes through the roof.
And then I guess the other connection piece to that, to global basketball, is the Next Stars program. Alex Sarr was announced in the last couple of days. Ariel Hook-Porty's returning. Teams in the NBL are interested. Has that, from a global scale, really made the NBL capture a lot of eyeballs because it's so unique, the opportunity?
Yeah, I think the Next Stars program has been an absolute game changer for the NBL, and full credit to Larry and Jeremy and the team for driving that so strongly, because it creates that connection between a fan who's in the middle of the US, who has seen their local player at their local high school on an amazing path to the NBA, who says, the way for me to become a better NBA player is actually to work with the NBL and go and play a season or two there. And that's really powerful when you think of all the other options that people have got to play basketball around the world, that they're selecting the NBL as the competition to come and further their careers. And I think we're again only scratching the surface of what Next Stars could be in the future.
The WNBL is a pretty hot topic in Australian sport at the moment. In the last couple of weeks, there's been a lot written and spoken about the state of the league, and to be frank, it's not all great at the moment. Where are conversations at the moment with the NBL and the WNBL in playing any sort of role?
Yeah, what I've loved about the approach that the NBL has taken to date is what I would call a whole of game approach. That it's not just concerned with what happens in the NBL, but it's also how do we grow the game? and that's growing participation. You've seen the growth that's happened through Basketball Australia has been phenomenal. We've seen the growth that's happened in NBL 1, which has been a fantastic partnership. And we look in the same way with WNBL. Whatever we can do to help, we'd love to support the WNBL and Basketball Australia in whatever they need. And clearly that's run by Basketball Australia with our full support. We've learnt a few things along the way that we think we can help contribute. And I think WNBL has, as much as there's some challenges at the moment, but they've got lots of amazing benefits and they've driven some great momentum, as you've seen, particularly in the last season. So whatever we can do to help, the door's open and we'd love to do that.
No matter how small or how great, I guess, could you see somewhere down the line, if the opportunity existed, that the WNBL and the NBL almost ran simultaneously together?
Yeah, it's probably a bit premature of specifically what that looks like, but I'm a big believer in the spirit of partnership and collaboration, and we want to do that with Basketball Australia. We've got a great partnership together. Whatever we can do to play our role to help, we're absolutely up for it.
The current broadcast deal finishes at the end of NBL 24. It's been a big one. It's the first time in a long time that the NBL has had a cheque coming back the other way as opposed to paying to be on air. How important is the next one though? So this was a big step forward, but how important is the next broadcast deal?
Yeah, they always say in broadcast dealings, the next one's the most important. But I think it's absolutely critical because what our broadcast partners do is help create that in-game at venue experience and scale it. And I think for so many of our fans, whether they're NBL fans in Australia, New Zealand, or frankly around the world, the way they regularly interact with our game is to watch it through our broadcast partners. So people sometimes get caught up on the dollars, and I think that's important. I get more concerned about the connection. How do we make sure that we connect with a brilliantly produced product, that it's available on the platforms that people can access, and it's done in a way that helps create the fantastic stories that we've got to tell. And so when we think about the broadcast deal, this next one is going to be absolutely vital, and I'm looking forward to playing a role in that. But I do want to make sure that it's not just about the dollars, it's how we make sure that we can create those deeper connection with the fans.
And is free-to-air a key plank of that, do you think, with your learnings from other sports?
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think the partnership so far with ESPN and Foxtel and the KO growth has been amazing, and clearly with Channel 10 as our free-to-air partner has delivered some incredible growth. But again, I think we all collectively look around the table and say, we're only scratching the surface of what this could be. So yes, free-to-air component is a really important part because particularly for those fans that are just probably connecting in with the NBL for the first time, they may not know about that connection with ESPN and KO and Foxtel. So the way they come across the NBL is through a free-to-air partnership, and clearly that gets you a lot of eyeballs. But again, it's got to be the right partnership, and we have to make sure that those connections to the fan, that becomes the absolutely most important attribute of any broadcast deal.
You haven't officially started with the NBL yet. One of your final acts with the AFL was Gather Round, that has happened recently, and in the NRL Magic Round has been a roaring success, and they've just recently completed another one. Could you see a situation where we had a similar type concept in the NBL, where everyone got together for one round and played in the one location?
Yeah, I absolutely could. I mean, I think the AFL Gather Round, which has been my creation for the last 18 months, people see the record results, 268,000 attendees, all 9 games sold out, a buzz around the city of Adelaide, the biggest broadcast ratings, biggest AFL platform website app ratings that they've ever had. People kind of think, that's a good concept from the AFL, but the sort of secret with that is, yes, the AFL led it, but the power came through in the collaboration of the entire ecosystem coming together, because the clubs got on board and really supported it. The players were incredible partners and embraced it. The broadcasters, the commercial partners, the venues, and most importantly was the South Australian government. That frankly, if it was just the AFL trying to create that, it wouldn't have been anywhere near as successful. But when you get the whole ecosystem coming together, that's when you can create something that is pretty special. So when you think about it from an NBL context, I'd take the same model and approach, is how do we make sure that we can create benefits for the clubs and the players and government partners and broadcasters and commercial partners. And if we do that together, I think we can create the most incredible weekend of sport anywhere in the country, and I can't wait to do that.
I'm not sure if you're at the stage of taking suggestions, but I'd just like to nominate Noosa as a place that I think would be really good for gather round.
Good. Noosa's generally in the top three. Maldives was my number one. But we'll see how we go with Noosa. I love it.
Trade period and the free agency period is still going on at the moment for this season. I think it's been one of the biggest. Is there room to expand on that? Is there room for in-season trading, mid-season trading? What's your position on player movement?
Yeah, look, I'm generally a believer that player movement creates opportunity. And it creates opportunity in a number of ways. Whether or not it's the backup centre who isn't getting a lot of minutes, who might be more of a starter at another team, creates clearly opportunities for people to connect with their favourite players and clubs. Obviously great media content as well. But I think what we're trying to do is create a fun entertainment product. And so if there's some more interest in those games, if a player gets an opportunity to be the best that they can be, and if fans have even more reasons to connect to the game, then I'm generally a believer in movement of players. Just got to make sure we get that right balance, because as fans to connect with their players and their clubs, and if they're moving every year to different teams, and that sometimes makes that bond a little bit more challenging. So we have to get a reasonable balance. But I know, again, in good partnership with the Players Association, with the clubs, clearly with our partners as well, they're great conversations to have.
What I want to ask you about is, which you would have seen as a fan watching on, and no doubt these conversations about joining the league were happening, but there was a lot of criticism around refereeing. Some of it, to be frank, was a little unsavoury at times. Are we in a position at the moment where perhaps players, coaches, just general behaviour, is the league a little bit too lax at times on behaviour? Should things be tightened up a little bit?
Yeah, look, I'd take a step back before answering that question and say, it's a pretty obvious statement, but the game can't go ahead without referees. And not only do we need to have referees, we need to have the best referees, because if we're having the best quality game, players need to have confidence that we've got the best referees. And so we have to create an environment for the referees to be at their best. In the same way as we create environments for the players and the coaches to be at their best, same thing with the referees. So I want to make sure, like always, that there's a respectful relationship. And again, I've generally felt a good level of intent from the coaches and the clubs to create a respectful environment for the referees to do their job. And of course, like all of us, sometimes emotion gets in the way, and we've all said things that perhaps we'd, on reflection, say differently. But I generally think there's a pretty good intent. And yes, from time to time, we're going to have to straighten a few things up, and I won't be shy in doing that. But again, generally speaking, I think we've got pretty good intent.
The Jack Jumpers are for sale at the moment. You spoke before about the 2 years that they've had, and it has been phenomenal. I think they're the envy of every sport that's wanting to start a new team, and there's a roadmap for that. Mm-hmm. They are for sale at the moment. Do we have any update on a potential sale?
Yeah, all the conversations have been really positive. And I think what's important for Larry and the team is that they remain a uniquely Tasmanian team. Sure. And it's clearly been embraced by the fans, but I think success would be, we'd love to see ownership and control of the Jack Jumpers be primarily from Tasmanian people, because I think that just helps deepen that connection. And so there's lots of interested parties, lots of good conversations going on. No doubt there's a couple of twists and turns that'll come, but it seems very significant, the level of interest that's coming already. At the moment, it's been really focused on Tasmanian owners and businesses, and then in time they'll expand out beyond Tasmania. But I think if we could find a solution with Tasmanians retaining control of the Jack Jumpers, that would be our perfect outcome.
Is an AFL team coming into Tasmania, is that a threat or is that an opportunity?
I think it's a massive opportunity. I think any time you can create great level athletes and clubs and games coming to a place like Tasmania, it can only help. I mean, some obvious benefits, we're playing in different seasons.
Sure.
AFL plays in the winter, and obviously we're a summer sport. But what I love is more eyeballs are going to be on sport in Tasmania, and we'll back the Jack Jumpers and ourselves to be able to leverage as many of those into becoming Jack Jumper fans, and we're confident that it'll be a great opportunity for the Jack Jumpers to take a step forward.
Another team is Brisbane that I wanted to ask you about. So last season was a pretty forgettable one for a team that's got a rich history on and off the court. Last season was forgettable. Is there any concerns there from an NBL point of view about not only the on-court side of things, but also the off-court side of things?
Yeah, not at all. I mean, I've been around professional sport long enough to know that not all 10 teams can win the championship, and not all 10 teams can have the best season they've ever had. And so there are going to be peaks and troughs with any professional organisation. I guess what my focus as the leader of the NBL is to make sure that the troughs aren't extenuating, and ideally there's a balance of peaks that any fan feels like heading into a season, their team have got a reasonable chance of being successful and obviously winning the title. So I've got confidence in the Bullets. They'll work their way through that. It's a pretty short turnaround as we get into the next season. But I think in hearing some of the plans that I've got full confidence that Brisbane Bullets will have a cracking NBL 24 and beyond.
So there's some conversation that's already gone on with the ownership group just to get a gauge of where things are at?
Yeah, look, part of my approach in taking on this role is to be very communicative. My door's always open, my phone will always be on. So I've been in touch with representatives from every single club, both the owner and CEO level, as well as our commercial partners and broadcasters. So the Bullets know how committed we are to helping them through what has been a challenging time. But again, we've got full confidence in that ownership and the front office there, that they'll have, as I said, a fantastic NBL 24.
Now, the last one, we've got a couple of fan questions that we put out on social media, so we'll get to them in a second. But growth versus keeping the fans happy can be a tricky balance sometimes, and we've seen the A-League sell their grand final off for commercial decisions. Super Netball have done something similar as well. Where do you sit? I'm talking more as a sports administrator here, not as the NBL CEO, but where do you sit in terms of that balance of commercial decisions versus, I guess, decisions that are in the best interest of the fan?
I think the reality is you have to do both. I mean, of course, the fans are our number one priority. We need to have deep connection to the fans. We need to make sure that they're on the journey with us. And that's always, as a sports administrator, that's always the challenge we've got, is we need to keep moving forward with new growth, new innovation, new bold ideas, because unless you change, then you're getting left behind. But to do that, you've actually got to bring people on the journey. And so that's our fans, that's our clubs, that's our partners commercially, that's our broadcasters. And so part of my role and the NBL's role is we've got to spend some time explaining where we're at and put the why into some of those decisions. And I'm a firm believer that if you communicate and you collaborate and you bring people on the journey, then people will support the decision. Now, they don't always like it, may not always be the decision that they make, but that's the role of leadership. You're never going to please everybody, but we're the custodians of the competition, we're the custodians of the game, and we need to make sure we're making those decisions in the best interest of the game. And I'm certainly a bit biased towards the fans. So make the right decisions for the fans, and generally speaking, that helps all of the rest of the partners.
So we did give fans the opportunity, David, in the lead up to today to ask you some questions. A lot of them were common themes around expansion, where the league's going. One of the other common questions, though, was around the potential for an AllStar Game. Is it something you could see in the near future?
Yeah, look, a great question from George, and we thank him for his support of the league. I think the AllStar Game is one of the highlights of the NBA calendar. It really creates great energy and momentum. Clearly the players love it, but it's a nice exclamation point as you head towards the playoffs. And I think what's happened in the NBL has had a few different iterations of it. Some have worked, some probably haven't worked as well. But what it really does is got to create a quality execution. It has to be an experience that the players want to be a part of, the clubs want to support, and most importantly, the fans want to turn up and support, either in venue or watching on broadcast. So we've still got a little bit of work to do on that concept, but I think it's definitely in the future. We just got to make sure we execute at the level that fans expect.
And another common question was around the salary cap, and we spoke about threats earlier. The Asian leagues, has the ability to pay a little bit more than what the NBL does at the moment, sometimes a lot more. Is there the potential and the discussion around increasing the salary cap to combat some of those threats?
Yeah, I mean, again, without knowing all the specifics, I know the salary cap has continued to increase, and that's a full credit to the league and the clubs and our partners who have collectively delivered great revenue growth that then gets shared amongst the players, as well as obviously all the clubs, etc. So I think absolutely we need to keep growing that, but what we also have to do is grow it responsibly. There's no point in writing big checks that then it's unaffordable for the clubs and the league, and then we're going to be in a situation in 5 years' time where the sustainability of individual clubs and the league is put into question. And under my watch, we're going to make sure that we make the responsible decisions for delivery of sustainable growth.
The last one is around you. So you haven't actually officially started yet, although we have spoken about that you've done a lot already. You've got a pretty big family holiday coming up. Where are you headed?
Yeah, we've got a kind of once in a lifetime trip to Europe. We're taking our 3 kids over there. They haven't really spent any time there. So we can't wait to go and see. We've got some friends and family there. Get re-energised after a pretty long and busy time at the AFL, and then really bring a lot of energy and excitement so that once we hit the ground in mid-July, we can get ready for what's going to be, I think, the best NBL season on record, and I can't wait to be a part of it.
It's great to have you involved, great to have you with the league, and thanks for sitting down with me today.
Great, thanks Jack. Take care. See you soon.